This debate is adjourned and set down for resumption next sitting day. I call on Government Order of the Day number 1.
Social Security Amendment Bill number 3, interrupted debate on second reading.
The Honourable Anne Tolley has the call, and I understand that she has 4 minutes and 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. When the House was discussing this bill last, I was outlining that the bill amends the Social Security Act of 1964 so that the benefit system treats people in similar circumstances consistently, because if it isn't consistent, it isn't fair. And the fact that this bill brings in changes because at the moment the Act allows some people who are receiving weekly compensation to be treated differently depending on who is paying that compensation. And it also allows some students to get access to a higher rate of accommodation assistance than others. So just dealing with that first issue, I was explaining that for one group of people, they are having their weekly compensation payments deducted dollar for dollar, and another group of people were having their weekly compensation payments treated as income. And that was not fair, because if those payments were treated as income, higher benefit payments would result, as income affects the benefit by abatement. So, for example, under abatement for job seeker support, the first $80 to $100 of other income does not result in any reduction of the person's benefit at all. But for each additional dollar after that, the benefit is reduced by up to 70 cents. So the amendments set out in the bill make sure that no group of people who are paid weekly compensation will get a substantially higher benefit payment for the sole reason that they have their weekly compensation paid by an accredited employer rather than ACC. And it also means that if a claim for weekly compensation fails after the payments have been made by an accredited employer or by ACC, a benefit application can be treated as if it was received at the time of the accident. So the backdated benefit payments offset, in that case, the amount of weekly compensation that the person has to repay. Mr Speaker, the Ministry of Social Development has treated all weekly compensation payments the same, regardless of who is making the payments. But the Ministry had, before the court decision, understood that payments of weekly compensation made by or on behalf of accredited employers ought to be treated the same as payments of weekly compensation by ACC, and this bill confirms that practice. The one exception to that is the person who won an appeal to the Social Security Appeal Authority. And that person is protected by the provisions in the bill and will not have to repay the additional benefit money received after that decision. So, Mr Speaker, the changes set out in this bill will make sure that the Social Security Act treats two groups of people: the students who are trying to access a higher rate of accommodation assistance through one door rather than the same door that most students are following, and then those people who are receiving weekly compensation, no matter who is paying them that compensation, are all treated in a consistent manner, because that is only fair and right. And Mr Speaker, can I just take a minute as I close before commending this bill, just to acknowledge, as I did very briefly in my answer to a question in the House today, the work of a woman that New Zealand has lost last evening, and that is Celia Lashley. She's described as a social campaigner, but she's best known, or she's well known in the country through her work with the Good Man project, and I actually have someone working in my office that was one of those students in the 25 schools, boys' schools that Celia worked with throughout the country. And that formed the basis of her book, He'll Be Okay, Growing Gorgeous Boys into Good Men, which is a terrific book, particularly for parents of boys. The other book that I think is probably essential reading for anyone who becomes or has aspirations to become the Minister of Corrections, and it is The Journey to Prison, Who Goes and Why. It's a tough read, but as I say, it's essential reading for anyone that has the responsibility of incarcerating New Zealand citizens. But look, Celia did a lot of social and justice sectors. She worked for the probation services, she worked in corrections for many years, but she was a woman who was not afraid to say the things that needed to be said. And sometimes we didn't like to hear it, but actually she was fearless in standing up for New Zealanders who couldn't speak for themselves, and for some of the New Zealanders who are at most risk in our communities. So we wish her well. We know she's gone upwards and has gone to a far better place and will be looking down on us. She didn't have much time for politicians, but we know that she will be looking down and listening to us. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, this is a good bill, and I commend this bill to the House.
Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.